Anyone? So I guess not many of us are actually, having direct contact with them. And that brings me to the introduction of this research. So information on the minorities that people from certain societies are exposed to is usually based on the images and narratives constructed by the media. And the images and the narrative is quite dangerous because it has the capability to affect the perception on diverse groups. So common forms of mass media such as the newspapers, radio channels, and television broadcasts act as key players in influencing public opinion about minorities. Preferential media assess and their social cognition, for example, on ethnic affairs, may actually be influencing factors in the selection of topics, the choice of news actors, quotation pattern, style, prominence, the way the minorities are depicted and described, and also the overall feature of the news article itself. In fact, in the last few decades, there have been an increasing number of research inspecting the projection of indigenous community in media. Am I audible? Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Very
And
clear.
what I was telling just now was
Yes,
in the past few decades, okay, there have been an increasing number of research conducted inspecting the projection of indigenous community in the media. If I were to quote one or two, it would be examples such as Baltimore in 1999, Collins and Drake in 2009, and recently Hu and Chuan in 2019. So in the coverage of ethnic affairs, a collective of experiences by these researchers have repeatedly shown evidence that the dominant media has always propagated stereotypes and biasness towards the indigenous community to various degrees and also extent. And in fact, the media also construct them, okay, in binary terms such as us versus them, us referring to the mainstream people and them referring to the indigenous community, civilized versus barbarian, modern versus traditional, individual rights versus collective rights, okay, these kind of terms. And these arguments provide the backbone, okay, of this study that pays much attention to the largely neglected Orang Asli community and the details of their representation in media. Hence, the main aim of this study is to investigate the major themes associated with the community when they are presented in the media. Some introduction on the Orang Asli. So the Orang Asli refers to the indigenous communities or minorities residing in Peninsular Malaysia or the west of Malaysia. They comprise approximately 150,000 people, and this figure actually represents less than 1% of the total population of Malaysia. And they can be divided into three major groups: the Negritos, also known as the Semang people, the Senoi, and also the Aboriginal Malay. And each group is further divided into 6 further subgroups. So these people have been demoted to become the most impoverished in terms of living status report, whereby 50% live below the poverty line. And this has been suggested by Nicholas in 2010. So in fact, Mr. Colin Nicholas is one of the fundamental researcher about Orang Asli in Malaysia. A lot of my research, I have referred to his publications. I would like to share some pictures with all of you on the Orang Asli and the way they live. So if you see this picture, you can see that they live in a dilapidated kind of houses, and their water sources are usually from the river. So these are some pictures to share with all of you. So I will next talk about the notion of media and discrimination. So the news media become the most important source of information and belief applicable in forming the interpretative framework for specific types of social and public relations. The power of media is exceptional, and this is because large segments of the dominant communities do not have access to information regarding ethnic affairs, as they only possess few or no immediate experiences with members of the minority group. So this is why I asked all of you the question earlier. We are all doing researches on indigenous people, but how many of us have actually got direct contact with the minority group? And since majority of us do not have direct contact with them, we rely on the media, okay, to know news about them, to learn about them. And if the media portrays them, writes about them in a positive light, we will be looking at this community in a positive perspective. And vice versa, if the media writes badly about them, then our perception on them will be negative as well. So the media also has the power to decide the selection of topics, the choice of news actors, quotations, patterns, style, prominence, and the way the minorities are depicted and also described. So some previous research which has looked at the patterns of representation of the indigenous community. I have three over here. The first one is by Meadows in 2011. And according to him, the media coverage of indigenous people have often revolved around discriminatory stereotypical images. And another research by the Australian Royal Commission on Aboriginal People in 1996, they managed to find out that these indigenous people are often misinterpreted and portrayed stereotypically as pathetic victims, angry warriors, or noble environmentalists. And another research by Marlina and Shakila in 2016, they managed to find out that the depiction of the community in the media have been negative and prejudiced. The community is always projected as backward, clinging to their traditional way of life, resisting modernization, and also being dependent. So the main question here is, what are the major themes associated with the community when they are presented in media? Are they projected positively or they are projected negatively? So in order to answer this question, okay, I have adopted, okay, the application of, or I have actually applied Van Dijk's theory of semantic macrostructures to analyze the macrostructures or the themes of the news report. And the corpus of this study consists of 158 news articles extracted from The Star. The Star is a Malaysian mainstream and most read newspaper published between January 2019 and also June 2019. And the newspaper is in English. So findings and discussion, what I managed to find after conducting the analysis is that I managed to find 183 macrostructures. Remember, I have 183 newspaper articles, and as such, I also have 183 themes which I derived through the macrostructure analysis. So the macro analysis, it places emphasis on thematic structure. And I'm going to quote Van Dijk in 1980 over here. He defined it as the process of organizing themes or topics in providing an overall picture of a discourse. So the macrostructure over here refers to the gist of the text, which is the information best remembered by readers in construction and comprehension of a particular discourse. Okay, probably this is a little bit technical for all of you, but to make it simpler, let me just quote an example. So recently there was an explosion, okay, in Lebanon, and a lot of information have been shared by the media. We read a lot of newspaper articles about it. But how much information will we able to retain maybe after 1 or 2 weeks? So probably when we write, okay, we might be giving attention to the number of casualties, the exact location where the explosion took place, and who's actually responsible, what is the name of the explosive. So all this information we can remember, but what happens after 1 week, 2 weeks, 1 month, or 1 year? Would we be able to retain all the information? If you ask me, the only information I can retain now is there was an explosion in Lebanon. That's it. So that is exactly what I am trying to prove over here. Okay, so by providing specific themes, so this theme would be remembered by the readers for a longer period of time. So what kind of themes are these newspaper agencies trying to, portray in the depiction of indigenous community? So some examples of macrostructures I found, okay, out of the 183, of course, I won't be able to show you all of them, but these are some which I managed to find. I have about 6 over here. So the first one is 43 Orang Asli of the Batik tribe died of measles outbreak. So something relating to health issues. The second one is conversion of 5,000 Orang Asli to Islam. Malnutrition and low immune system among the Orang Asli. Orang Asli students receive help, improving the lives of Orang Asli through ecotourism. And the last one here, Orang Asli is well cared for. So these are some of the examples macrostructures that I found. So these 183 macrostructures can be classified into 4 major themes. So I managed to identify 4 themes. So the first one is social issue, and then we have corporate social responsibility, economy, and also politics. Here, under social issues as a major theme, I managed to find a few minor or sub-themes as well. For example, land rights, article frequency, 32 articles presented, written on land rights, amenities infrastructure 2, poverty lifestyle 12, health 69, education 8, Islamization, crime and law, both of them 2 respectively. So some findings on the social issue analysis. So the Orang Asli in the news report show that they face non-recognition of their community's right to the customary land. And they are also still assumed to be left behind in Malaysia in terms of access to basic infrastructure as compared to other population of Malaysia. So they are also deprived in terms of health when compared with the rest of the Malaysian population. And the dropout rate of Orang Asli children is proportionally high in comparison with the national average. And considering there are a lot of researches done in currently in my school, and we are trying to provide some kind of solutions in order to increase the teaching and learning experiences of Orang Asli children. In fact, if you still remember yesterday's plenary session, there was a presenter from my school, Dr. Marlina, who actually presented on the application of gender pedagogical framework in order to improve the writing abilities of Orang Asli children. So yes, a lot of initiatives are actually being taken to help improve their learning experiences. And besides that, the policymakers also try to convince that the Orang Asli in embracing Islamic religion in order to secure assistance from the government. So the balanced 3 major themes, corporate social responsibility, economy, and politics, they can be divided into minor themes as well. As for CSS, or corporate social responsibilities, we have 5 news reports written about donation, donation by the non-government organizations, towards this community, welfare policies, a total of 11 articles. And then for the theme economy, the sub-theme is development, and 11 articles written about the development projects for the community, and politics. Politics here, there was 4 news articles written and published, and the 4 of them are concerning by-election. So some discussion on the corporate social responsibility, economy, and politics. So the community is shown to be always welcoming aids, donation, and other development strategies crafted by the authorities. And in terms of sustenance, development, and identity, a clear one has become obvious between the privileges and protection accorded to the Orang Asli and the more dominant Malays of Malaysia. And also the Orang Asli have gone through multiple development strategies foisted on them. So discussion and conclusion of my research. So the main themes derived from the analysis support the findings of previous studies conducted among indigenous community. However, elements of misrepresentation and discrimination were observed. And newspapers in Malaysia possess the ability to structure, shape, and change the ideology about the community presented to the mainstream public. And presenting the Orang Asli in an unfavorable manner might influence the mind of the reader to stereotype the community the same way it has been stereotyped in the media. And thus, the study calls for appropriate recognition and representation of the community to be conferred, especially in print media. So with that, I conclude my presentation. Thank you all for listening.